We are talking about platforms and algorithms, how we can subvert or work around them in their hunger for our attention. You know the Pokemon Guzzlord. It just consumes endlessly, it really can't be reasoned with, and it never seems to be full. That's how I think of these platforms. And I'm calling out the gods right now. These are YouTube, TikTok, Meta, and others. You know them. So, to work within the systems and to subvert the hunger for our attention, we can use a little bit of theory to help us illuminate the patterns that we are seeing. So, I'm going to introduce a few of them, and I'll thread in some Pokemon to give you examples. The first is the French theorist Guy Debord, and Debord is focused on this idea of spectacle. It's essentially when our social life becomes more of a performance and the appearances replace our lived experiences. So in the Pokemon world, we can see this with Mega Evolutions and Dynamax battles, even some shiny variants, because the spectacle keeps escalating. Every generation feels like it has to outshine the last. Even in Pokemon Go, when we have regular Pokemon that we catch, like a Pikachu or a Clefairy, they don't feel like wins because they're not shiny and they're not rare and they're not new. So that reward loop fails. And what we end up doing with those regular Pokemon is probably just transferring them. Spectacle, though, is going to thrive and emerge from more and more events because it's giving us more spawns, more shiny variants, and generating more hype. When spectacle becomes the norm, this idea of wonder and awe and slowing down and reflecting, it gets compressed into noise. Guzzlord just keeps the feed scrolling. But we can think about how to resist from another theorist. Desserteau was a cultural theorist and gave us a way to think about how we can resist spectacle and that hunger for attention. Desserteau called it tactics. So strategies are what the dominant entities like corporations, governments, and other agencies use. Strategies are what the powerful use. Tactics are used by the rest of us to survive the systems that we don't and cannot control. So we cannot control these gods, these algorithm platforms and gods. So in Pokemon terms, the strategy given to you by the developers, the graphic designers, the corporations like Niantic, the strategy is the map that you are given. But the tactic is when you take that long grass route, or maybe you go through a side cave, or you meander a little bit, or you use Butterfree to win a league match. Tactics are when you refuse to play the game exactly how it's designed. Tactical resistance on platforms like YouTube, for example, are repurposed a little differently. Tactics could be choosing to slow down with content creation, to leaning into nostalgia and reflection over that spectacle, uploading slowly, or not having certain days you drop materials. It's more when you don't have metrics in mind and you're just trying to stay true to what it is you're trying to create. So when you slow down your uploads, when you favor that memory, that slowness, that nostalgia over virality, that is resisting. That is tactical resistance from Desserteau. Then we pull in another group of theorists, Tom and Doss. One of the things that this double trouble team is doing is they're extending Desserteau's thinking into a world of communication. So they're calling it tactical technical communication. And again, that's just when everyday users like us, Pokemon trainers, viewers, the audience, when we repurpose tools and platforms, and even content systems to operate and resist those algorithms and platforms. So this looks like using Pokemon Go not to grind for that experience, but to walk in the park, to reconnect with a friend on community day. Or this might be in TCG, just opening the cards to admire the art. You're not worrying about the resale value, you're not worrying about YouTube performance, you're just doing it because you want to. That is a shift. That moves from the platform-centered creation to a user-centered meaning. That is tactical, technical communication. In this video, we're not trying to feed the gods. We are trying to find space between their teeth. But that also means we can get burned out. These platforms, they reward creators, but not always, because that could be at the cost of performance. I want to talk a moment about some of these big channels. I'm not going to name names because we're taking on gods today. Huge channels, and you know who they are. They're established, they rip and ship, they give good thumbnails, maybe good explanations, they break it down. These channels are proof that the system works. But those creators operate on a different level. They have to constantly output on large scale terms. They have huge teams, big production teams that help them with their analytics, their capital, their sponsorships, the rhythm of content creation, so that they're trending, they're spinning it so that they're always in the spotlight, always in the limelight, always getting views. But even for them, burnout is still in their narrative. Recursive burnout is when rest becomes part of that performance. This could be these channels or these big creators saying, I'm taking a break for a moment, just need a mental health break, things like that. And taking a break, saying I'm taking a break, becomes a strategy for engagement. That rest, that silence, when they're stepping away, actually becomes content. It keeps them in the loop. It keeps them being viewed. And that exhaustion that they're feeling actually becomes spectacle. The Pokemon world has this too, and there's another form of it. In Pokemon, this is another battle. Charizard has 6 or 7 variants across games and cards at this point. It never gets to be just simply Charizard. It's a shiny, it's a Mega, 1 or 2, X or Y, it's a Gigantamax, there's more. In these platform systems, remember, these gods, they have so much influence that the creators are celebrated, but only when they're useful. And once those creators fall off, the gods move on. So if these gods are real, and their names are YouTube, TikTok, Meta, Twitch, then we can think of creators as the labor force that feeds these gods. And these big channels, they're champions. But even in the Pokemon world, the champions fail. You take on the Elite Four, right? Cynthia, Leon, Red, they all get dethroned. So it's not a question of if they get dethroned, but when. So these champions, they rise through the spectacle. The climb is steep and the reward is thin. Of course, they're capitalizing on it. They have merch. They're set up probably financially for the rest of their lives. But the more that these champions give, the more that the gods ask. That's why we need to learn to name the gods, and we need to study their moves. And we need to find the gaps between the rules and build something that is human there. Remember, we need to pull from tactical resistance because that is tactical technical communication. That's what this video is. Now, remember, the gods are watching.